believe we've spent the morning being almost brainwashed with the opportunity here? Do we all believe? Do you believe? You convinced? Oh, I'm going to use Alvisa. This is a 2G response. Do you believe? Are we going to do this together? Okay, the front of the room is convinced. So we've got a little bit to work on. So we're going to try and see how we make this real now with a debate. We're going to bring together an esteemed panel. If we can go to that slide. There we go. Joined by Shankar. We are also going to welcome Aslan Abedin, who's the Chief Enterprise Business Officer for Celcom, Herbert Blum, who's the Global Telecoms Lead for Bain & Co., and Asli Mohammed, who's the Chief Transformation Officer from AirAsia. Please give them a very warm welcome as they join me on stage.
Picture swap between me and Aslan.
Oh, sorry. Okay, take a seat, gentlemen. So, this is going to be an interesting debate. We've asked the panelists to really debate, so don't expect the sort of normal panel format. And we want to also make this something you can interact with as well. So, in the mobile app for this event, or directly through your web browser, we'll be using Slido. We're going to have a few polls for you as the audience. You can also use that tool to ask questions. They'll come to me as the moderator. I'll do my very best to pass them out to the panel. So while we're getting set with that, if you just go onto your phone, onto slido.com, the event code's DTA19. It's really simple to use, and we'll be using that throughout the event. So let me start with the panel. We've just heard Shankar's perspective. We've heard other perspectives throughout the morning. Asli, you are coming to us here as the customer in many ways, also a company that is transforming itself and thinking very differently about its future in a way I think actually a lot of companies here could be inspired by. Give us a sense of what you're doing in AirAsia and also the transformation you're going through, and perhaps a little bit of what you expect from companies like the communications industry in helping you in that transformation.
Thank you very much, Nick. Very good morning. Just to check, there's a swap between the picture, we're not doppelganger. So that's Aslan, this is Asli, the name's kind of the same. And we kind of work at the same company way back.
Beautiful.
Just a quick show of hands. How many of you fly using AirAsia to come to this event? No? Oh, okay, there's one or two there. Thank you very much. I mean, I just arrived this morning at 5 from Manila, so it's good to be here. And I think the biggest question is, why is an airline seated on the stage talking about 5G? I think to answer Nick's question, predominantly, I think I'll start with the shift that AirAsia is taking and my role with regards to how we're supporting the transformation. So AirAsia started as 18 years ago in what we call a 1.0 era as a pure low-cost carrier. So fast forward, we've won 11 times in a row, best low-cost carrier in the world. And then shifting from that model, pure low-cost model, we've been very true to this very innovative and digital business model where we're among the first to force people embrace digital as part of the user experience and customer experience. So that's the 2.0. So now we're shifting into AirAsia 3.0. So what is AirAsia 3.0? And my role is effectively trying to build the core strategies and as well as looking at how we can implement these aspirations. So as of now, AirAsia is a collection of 8 airlines in 6 different countries. We have over 250 airplanes and have been flying more than 500 million passengers to date. But the shift of 3.0 is moving AirAsia to more than just an airline. So what do we want to be? So the shift of 3.0 would put AirAsia in 3 different buckets. One is the traditional business, which is the airline. We're moving into a very ultra asset-light model where we don't own the aircraft. A lot of the aircrafts are leased, but we maximize every single real estate in the aircraft from monetization perspective and run the airline as efficient as possible, leveraging various technologies, AI, big data, and whatnot. So that's one. The second bucket is what we call rate bid ventures. This is This started as more of a byproduct when we started the airline, things that we charge you when you fly, all the things that you buy in between, baggage, food, and whatnot. But we realized there's more to that. So this has become mini unicorns within the group of AirAsia. And for example, we also have BigPay. Any users of BigPay in the house? Thank you very much. So we have a digital bank as part of the ecosystem. We have a digital logistic entity called Teleport that we leverage the belly of the aircraft and maximize digital last mile solutions. And also we have our shop, which is effectively an e-commerce marketplace. And RedBit Ventures as well plays a role as a venture capital to invest into technology that would enable us to become a much better and efficient airline. So we invest in various AI technologies, machine learning, chatbots, voice recognition that will be used into the airline. So the main unicorn moving forward, Asia 3.0, is what we brand itself is AirAsia.com, which is going into the super platform, going to the super app game. So how it's going to be moving forward? So who will be our competitors? So I can list it the whole day. It could be the mix of all the OTAs, online travel agents, the likes of Expedia. It could be a mixture of all those mobility players, the likes of Grab and Uber. It could be the likes of many more solution providers that amalgate various solutions. But we are doing a reverse because we have more than 500 million data of each and every one of you has flown on AirAsia. And we have the pattern and analytics in terms of what's your preference in terms of where do you fly from A to B, what kind of food do you like, and things you purchase in between. And how we're using that to really push the platform game moving forward is going to be a really game changer for us. And obviously, 5G is going to be enabler in order for us to push the right content, push the right mechanism in order to attract and have the best user experience and customer experience. Just put it into perspective when you open an app or open the website, when you choose a destination that you want to fly, we want to be able to give the closest realism in terms of what you're going to experience, from what you're going to experience on the airplane, how you're going to be exploring the journey upon landing at the airport and hotels that you'll be staying by using VR, AR, and much more.
Great. Very good. Thank you, Asli. And I think one of the most fascinating things about the AirAsia story is often from within the communications industry, we look and assume that the industry we're serving or the customer is quite static. But you're showing that this whole mindset shift, as your CEO says, we're a data company that happens to own some airplanes. I mean, that's a very different mindset to what you would expect.
Even that fact is not correctly true because we no longer own all the aircraft anymore. So.
Right. So it's a combination. Yes. It's a very interesting place to be, and it's becoming a digital hub, if you will, for Asia as well. So that's a great place to be. Aslan, let me come to you. In some ways, you're the customer. In some ways, maybe you're going through the same kind of transformation as AirAsia. Tell us a bit about what's your perspective on 5G changing the game, and what are the threads you would take out of this morning that work for Celcom?
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everyone. And I'm Aslan from Celcom, just to swap the pictures again. I think, let me just take a step back from Nick's question. I think just to explain, I think in terms of Axiata, which is the parent company of Celcom, it's got a three-pronged strategy. I think the first strategy, if you know that Axiata has 6 operators across the region, mobile operators. And I think in tune with its objective or its value proposition of advancing society through digital transformation, it has also basically gave birth to about 3 different digital companies, which are Axiata Digital Services, Axiata Digital Advertising, as well as Apigate, which is a platform company. And I think the third strategy is basically E.co, which actually provides infrastructure, telecommunication services to the operators. Yeah, so I think that's the portfolio for Axiata. From the Celcom point of view, I think in terms of 5G, I think it creates a whole lot of opportunities. We're very encouraged, or we're very enthusiastic about it. if you actually look at it, what it gives you is basically the data speed gives you appetite for more data consumption, which is good. So it creates a lot of new streams of revenue in that sense, yeah? Looking at it, we've got a lot of use cases, but what we feel is that it's going to come in phases and in waves, yeah? I think the most obvious, if you've seen from this morning at presentations, I think that the first wave will actually be enhanced mobile broadband, which is possibly the FWAs of the world. Gives you the speed, the data, the low latency, which encourages AR, VR, encourages as well gaming, yeah? I think that's going to be the first phase of it. You can always debate this, yeah? And that can actually be applied to both consumer as well as enterprise. So I think that will be the first phase. The second phase, we feel that it's going to be the likes of machine-to-machine, a massive machine-to-machine sort of applications. And these are the applications when you actually come to the fleet managements of the world, smart cities, water meters, utilities, or because of the capability of 5G to be able to cater for millions of devices per site. Yeah, so I think this is where possibly you can actually monetize it. And lastly, the third wave will be actually more mission critical, sort of mission critical machine-to-machine applications, where you've seen earlier in the slides that was presented, where you've got remote surgery, you've got drone surveillance technology, you've got industrial automation through robotics, yeah? So I think we're thinking that the wave of 5G will be in these three phases. If you want to prove me wrong, you got to wait for a year or 2 years, so I'm okay. But I think this is the way that we're going to go through the phases in Malaysia, specifically, and probably globally as well. Those are the sort of opportunities you can actually see with 5G. However, opportunities comes with challenges, right? I think that the main challenge that we actually see is basically the cost of investment. How do I actually really look at the return on investment for the 5G infrastructure? And I think that's basically a hot debate internally for the operators, yeah? One of the ways that I think that's number one in terms of the challenge. Second challenge is 5G is very much use case driven, yeah? And when it's use case driven, it actually it goes through all the layers from the application side of it, through the layer of the infrastructure side of it, through the layer of device side of it, yeah? I think for an operator coming from this backbone, backhaul, transmission, infrastructure sort of company, you don't really have all those resources, skills, capabilities in that one company. So in order to basically serve your new 5G customers, you probably have to actually organically expand, like some companies are doing, or you inorganically expand through M&A, or you go through collaboration, yeah? I think for Celcom, in terms of the strategy now, we're doing a hybrid. The collaboration part has its challenges, but we feel that collaboration, partnership across the industry, across the ecosystem will actually help us basically expedite the progress of 5G across the nation, yeah? Okay. So I think,
thank you,
let me just end there.
Thank you. All right. Now, I'm going to come to Herbert next. Herbert, Bain is advising the boards and CEOs of many of the world's operators.
Yep.
I'm sure the topics we're debating here are not new to you. Just help give us a flavor globally. Where would you say the industry's at in its mindset on this? What are the key questions coming to you from the conversations you're having, and what are some of the big challenges you're taking out of those conversations?
Yeah, great question. When you do talk to the boards around the globe for the network service providers, it's a very similar sentiment than in this room, which is if we long enough stare at this 5G stuff and the capabilities that it will provide, I'm sure it will work out great, and somehow magically we all will be better off. It will happen, by the way. I really am of the view that the 5G pessimists are wrong. The 5G naysayers are on the wrong camp. 5G will do great things. But this industry in this room has a lot to do. And it goes beyond just convincing the CFO that if we have a use case, that we actually can use that use case, plug a couple of bucks of ARPU against it, and thank heavens the business case works. That's not how 5G economics are going to work. 5G is going to be a platform. It's a whole bunch of capabilities. And given that it's a platform, this room, as a representative of the ecosystem that we represent, needs to actually go do a few things much better than we have done when 4G came. And you look at the last decade, you can look at the fantastic things that 4G and fiber connectivity, the connectivity layer, the glue of the modern society was really fantastic, the economic expansion that the ecosystem experienced. But if you're a service provider, the last decade was rather humbling because most of that value we feel went to the other guys while we spend all of the CapEx. So there is absolutely more opportunity to actually get more as we go into the next decade, and 5G is now the glue for all of that. And there's probably a couple things that we sort of, each of us, including us as advisors, by the way, have to do better. A couple things is, Shankar, you brought this up, the degree of cooperation among telco operators has to go way up. It's just not good enough to pat yourself on the shoulders and say, boy, we got IoT roaming. That is like 5% of what you need to actually make IoT work. And the connectivity layer has so many things to offer for actually make IoT applications actually work at the end of the day. And it's not the end use case that you have to worry about. It's about the ability for anybody who's going to program or build particular use cases and applications that they want to sit on your network or no one else's network, that no over-the-top provider will provide capabilities that you can't access in your network. And that is only achieved if you in this room start to think about more commonly, it doesn't matter if I'm in the Philippines and it doesn't matter if I'm in the US. If an airline lands in the US originating out of the Philippines and logistic needs to work, there's so much commonality beyond a SIM card that you guys need to instrument in. And you do that, you will gain relevance. So the ability to actually cooperate more is so critical, or else you have yet another decade where colleagues who work outside of service providers, their equity of their stock plan is worth a lot more than yours. So it's actually going to affect your personal wealth creation. And then the second big thing is, and Shankar, you also actually, I really like that, you brought this up. You need to bring the ecosystem in. We saw this in the Ericsson presentation too, and that's so easy said. When networks become a platform, that's what basically 5G is, one of the catalysts for what that technology will do. You need to be able to go, let other people go into that platform and access and consume those resources. That means you need to expose it. But we are a world apart from this. It feels intuitively right, but not the stuff that we have seen up on the slides today. Basic multi-branch carrier Ethernet. I mean, we're talking plain vanilla stuff. In the developed world, it takes carriers 45 days on average to provision a service like that. Yeah. 45 days. We want to program networks in matter of minutes. Yeah. So to understand, to talk about that we want to actually bring the ecosystem in, we have really some mileage to get behind us to actually make it easier for everybody to actually show up and say, I really want to work with you guys in the room and use those network resources, including a programmable network or network as a service. Yeah. So the opportunity is, the future is bright, but let's acknowledge that if the last decade was a guide, we have a little bit more to do as an ecosystem to actually be able to take full advantage, personally and as the network service providers.
Fully agree. Thank you, Herbert. Shankar, we've heard your perspective, so I'm going to come to you in just a moment, but I'd like you actually to reflect on an audience poll first. So let's go to our first audience poll first. You've heard this morning, I think we've covered everything from solving world hunger to every single industry on the planet being transformed. I'm getting a little worried up here that we're part of some kind of 5G hype cycle. So we're going to try and hopefully put that to bed in the next 20 minutes. But If we could go to the first poll on Slido for the audience, please. We're going to ask you, out of all the use cases you've seen, out of all the opportunities you see out there, is this about one industry? Is there a particular industry you see as the key use case? Or is it a generic play? So if we could bring up the Slido screen, please. Just let everybody take a few moments to vote. Hopefully everybody's got connected okay. And hopefully we'll see the results in just a minute. There is some scurrying in the corner of the room, so I'm assuming that something is happening.
I think folks are asking for the code.
The code is DTA19, if you're looking for the event code. DTA19, if you're trying to vote. Okay, we seem to be having a little trouble there. Let me just come down here and grab my phone where I can get the results through.
There it is.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I was just getting a 4G backup because Wi-Fi you can't rely on. So, okay, so there's a lot more than 58 people in the room, folks. Let's see if we can get a few more votes in here. Media and entertainment out on top so far, all of them in second place. So a lot of the media and entertainment opportunities are pretty B2C focused. Shankar, first reactions to that? Would you place your bets on a particular industry, or?
No, I wouldn't place my bet there. But I want to still let's give them more time to really see, like, if.
Yeah. Let's see that come in.
This is connecting, I don't think.
Yeah, I think maybe we are pushing the limits of Wi-Fi in here. So let's.
Uh-oh.
Should have gone with the 4G.
It's only 58 voters.
Okay, we'll just give you just another couple of seconds.
Ooh. 154 samples.
Okay, we're up to 154 votes, so not a lot of change, even with another 100 or so people. So you wouldn't place your bets there, Shankar?
Now, I would place my bet on manufacturing. So clearly from a consumer B2C use cases, yes, I can see AR, VR come to being. But really, from a manufacturing standpoint, when we talk about smart factories ushering in the fourth industrial revolution and the opportunity for what automation can do in the industries, I would say that's the big bet. And from a Verizon perspective, of course, we are working with marquee customers in each of these verticals as well to truly understand what are the problems and opportunities. Right? Unless you spend the time, like what Asli was talking about, to really understand what is the future for AirAsia, where are they trying to go? Because oftentimes as service providers, we look at who's the future customer. Now we should say, yes, look at that, and what is that customer's future as well?
Exactly.
So I think that future customer plus customer's future is truly what I think from a mindset standpoint we have to get into. And having said that, it's not a one-size-fits-all. The strategy that AirAsia has could be different than some other industry.
Yeah.
So for us knowing, having an opportunity to work across these multiple verticals, from what I've seen, if I were a betting person, I would say manufacturing is ripe with opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's a critical point, Shankar, in terms of the understanding that you have to go through. You talked about the Corning example, and
yeah.
I would imagine you've learned more in the last 2 years about the process of fiber optic manufacturing and what goes on in the factory than probably in a whole career.
Absolutely, right? It's not in a lab we're doing this. We're doing this in their fiber optic cable manufacturing facility, so you truly get to see when you have millimeter wave in play, how does that work in an environment where there is heavy machinery moving around, right? RF interference, all those kind of things, which you will not be able to learn unless you're truly going to have an environment like that. So that learning has been invaluable for us, and that continues across other verticals as well.
Asli, when companies are coming to you, I'm sure every day trying to sell you technologies and so on, how good do you feel is their understanding? How interested and real as a partner are they acting versus saying, here's a new technology, and what do you expect there?
It's very fresh to hear Shankar's perspective because, there's always a tendency to give us a menu and choose from what's available on the shelves. But I think this is where the DNA of AirAsia, we always challenge the equation to see how the support system from an ecosystem perspective can really benefit us. Because we are at a stage where the end state is still a question mark for us. There's a lot of possibilities. Hence, the ability to really work hand in hand in a partnership kind of model is important. I mean, I'll give you a good example. I think on the low millimeter wave, no price or guessing. We're working with one French company that is helping us from an IoT solution. But it's a very niche solutioning rather than taking whatever the solution that they have, because our requirements is different. It's going to be expanded over time. So we are able to customize the solution. I think we welcome more and more of that. And I think as both parties challenge each other in terms of what can be provided on the table, that's important.
Okay. So in terms of the challenges of working with those partners, you're saying that this is refreshing, so obviously you're not getting that today. Herbert, building on the points you made, is there a mindset shift here? I mean, what is it that's got to change if we're actually going to seize this opportunity?
I think one of the things that has to happen is that we, on the one hand, I think we feel very good about demonstrating use cases and going deep into the company's operations to create a proof point. I think we need to also galvanize around common capabilities that I was referring to, because then all of a sudden it becomes so much easier. And you were to run your business and pushing the boundaries of your business, you mentioned the word customization. And there's no question that some degree of customization will always happen. You have bespoke needs, and so that will not go away, but we have the challenge upon us to minimize how much customization we do. Right now, we have to do way too much customization to just make it work in the first place. And I think that is a key thing that I believe is a catalyst that when we were talking yesterday about the date of birth of devices that coming on stream, knowing where the precise locations are. If you were just to create the white pages again, not for humans, but for devices, the ecosystem would tremendously benefit from having actually such a global directory. And the services that could happen, I bet you that some of the customization you're doing today, if we had some of these common capabilities instrumented into our offering, I don't know if it's half, if it's a third, but a lot of the customization requirements, not yours, but everybody else, would go away, and I think the speed of adoption would go way up.
Okay, so speed, whole mindset in how we work with partners, different approaches to technology, some foundational technology standards and so on. What else? What else do we need to, we've heard the vision, but to make this real, or acknowledge there's challenges, what other challenges do we see on the horizon?
Yeah, if I were to build on Herbert's point as well, clearly, while we are taking the time to learn the different use cases by verticals as well, we also have to figure out how do we scale this. If you just focus on bespoke solutions one by one, then the business case doesn't stand, right? So clearly, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that this is a business that we can scale. So to figure out, but step one is to really understand what the enterprises need. And then zoom out to say, what are the common capabilities? That is something that we can scale. So if you look at 1G to 4G, we've been very successful. The model we had followed was pretty much you build it and they will come. Standards helped along the way, so that way, wherever you go, it was the same way to do this. But as we get into 5G and more of the emphasis being on enterprise, what does that standard become, right? How do you really scale that, I think, is one of the big things that we should focus. And the second one also I would add, Nick, is specifically if you focus on the enterprise segments and all the use cases we talked about, robotics, using computer vision, et cetera, we should also realize that enterprises have made, industries have made investments today. So when we talk about here is what is the art of the possible with 5G, it's upon us as CSPs to be able to take those industries from point A to point B. It can't be you just abandon everything, all the investments that I've made, and here you have a great end state. How do you really get the businesses to work with us and then show them an on-ramp to go from what they have today to a 5G world, I think is very important.
Yeah, Aslan, are you going to jump in?
Yeah, I was listening. I'm going to answer some of the topics that was discussed. I think the first question is, do you go consumer, do you go enterprise, right, with 5G? I think it depends. It's a lot of debate out there. Basically, if you go consumer, you go FWA, broadband, it's easy to scale. Yeah, it's a common, basically, common denomination that you can actually scale. If you go more towards large enterprises, then it's basically more complex sort of solution, where you probably need a bit more in terms of, I guess, personal or a more, I guess, focused approach towards it, yeah? And I think that's where the customization that Azli was talking about as well.
So maybe just interrupt you there for a moment, Aslan. I think this B2B versus B2C discussion is very interesting because as we work around the world with hundreds of operators, I'd say the majority I'm talking to have settled on B2B, but clearly there are B2C use cases. But when it comes to actually financing this, actually monetizing it, I'm going to go to a 2G style poll here for a minute. Quick show of hands, who believes that 5G monetization is going to come from B2C? Just put your hand up if you believe B2C is how we're going to pay for 5G. Not even one person?
There's one there.
Oh, one guy. Okay. Good on you, sir. Good on you for
We're all
representing.
accountants.
And if you believe it's B2B, then, so there's a lot of people aren't sure, maybe? Okay.
I don't believe it all.
Okay, but I think that's the fundamental starting point, because otherwise, if you're not even sure, as Shankar's really outlined, as has Azli, you know, if you're working in this partnership B2B way, it's a fundamental change in mindset. Yep. So if we go down the B2B path for a minute, Herbert, from a financial perspective, is this where the boardrooms of telcos around the world are?
That's what they're clinging on to, because I think the room may interpret your question as saying, where are new monetization opportunities coming from that I didn't see before, like incremental. And I somewhat subscribe to the few in this room. I belong to the one, so it's two. I think it's both, but we need to recognize, we need to separate between when BMW comes out with the next 500 car, they don't charge €1, $1 more when they come to a brand new remodel thing. We have to give consumers and enterprise CTOs justification why they keep paying us the money they do. Prices decline, it's a matter of law. Nothing we can do about it. You can just slow it down, and 5G helps. And so you need to reinvigorate your base offering. And you monetize, hell yeah, your existing customer base is actually 99% why we can fund 5G. CapEx is not going to explode. We can run the next 8, 9 years, your balance sheet, and fund all this stuff with mobile broadband and then some incremental stuff like B2B. So I was surprised to see that people didn't raise their hand. Yes, consumers will pay you a lot of money and fund all of this. The new stuff, I agree. The exciting stuff will come first from B2B and not from consumer. That I strongly agree with.
So there's a lot of technologists here today. A lot of the audience here are from the technology background. Let's just explore for a little moment what that means, what this shift means for technologists. We've talked about the macro change at an industry level, but Shankar, maybe starting with you, what does this mean for Verizon? What you've described to me with the likes of Corning must be a big shift.
Huge, right? So first is identifying now from a 5G standpoint, having good understanding of what is the art of the possible. So that's step one, right? Then we say, okay, fine. If that is what is the art of the possible, let's not just take the same approach that we have taken before, where we say, okay, like the point you made early on in the conference, Nick, right? So it's all focusing on the outcomes, not just the technology, right? And that is the approach that we're really taking, to say, okay, if this is what is possible, what kind of outcomes can we drive? And for consumers specifically, and for enterprises, and there are teams. We have identified, like I mentioned before, a core team within Verizon partnering with these different verticals as well to really say, what are the problems? What is it that you're trying to solve? What is the future strategy for you? Does the future, if the challenges that they have is all around increasing automation, how do you go about doing that in a huge robotic plant that you have in place? And that's the approach that we're taking, really, to understand more specifics industry by industry.
Azli, on the other side of that, the change that AirAsia is going through, how fundamental a transformation is that? You said that it's a very innovative company by nature, founder-run business, but how big is the change for you in how you operate as a business?
I think we started on the right note because it's very clear in every single transformation initiative that we're moving forward. There's a clear measurement, and we have 3 drivers that we really stick to, which is either cost, productivity, as well as growth. And we look at technology and digital as an enabler and the whole overarching element. But I think one context that I would like to put here is, I think, the element of customer experience is ingrained in the whole rollout of digital transformation across the board. Because we really religiously look at customer experience. So religious, we call it guest obsession. In every single initiative, it has every single MVP goes through that rigor of customer experience to ensure that we have the right measures. But I think to the point on B2B and B2C earlier, and also to Shankar's note, as an organization that embrace technology, we are among the first to take up a number of things, and from implementation, as well as an infrastructure, as well as for the employees. The biggest debate for us is from the costing mechanism. How's the charging mechanism works like. I think that's where I stress a point again on the whole partnership model on a win-win scenario.
Okay. Now, there's one other topic we've touched on throughout the morning, and it came up yesterday in our CXO summit, and that's the topic of federation. How this industry that's trying to serve so many other industries can present one global face to that market. How can we make it easier? And Shankar, you picked up on this in your speech, but I'm going to start with Herbert first, because we had a great debate yesterday about federation, what it means, why is it important? Just give us a flavor of, perhaps for the economics of the industry, how important you see federation being.
The economics are profound if we get this right. So some not overly complicated math says that if we were to increase the relevance by being more federated and making it really hard for over-the-top to provision into end applications the things that we should be providing in the first place, that's why over-the-top exists, then all of that value wouldn't shift to over-the-top. It would stay in the network layer. And when you do that math, it ends up being that roughly about 50% of enterprise value would go back to the CSPs. Now, given the debt on your balance sheet, it would double the equity. That affects you. And so the impact for you personally is actually really, really high. And so getting this right, everybody agrees, is obvious. But actually making it happen is really, really difficult. Typically, this industry first always goes to specific end applications, like RCS was a good example, or the 1-800 number back in the days. So those things we can wrap our head around. But then we have horizontal capabilities, the second bucket of type of federation where we coordinate. And the 3GPP is a great example, and roaming, where we actually get together and provide standards. And then if we were really good at this, we would also get better at some early stage, recognizing early stage like cloud 8 years ago. The carriers could have done a much better job actually participating in that value chain, but we missed the boat. And so federation is hugely important, but it's hard to do. Because it's easy to understand, but when you guys all leave the room, you have day jobs to do, you have to meet the quarterly budget. And so that makes it really, really hard. But something like the TM Forum has actually the ability to change that up. And I think that is really inspiring about this particular organization, and why we participate here is because it's one of the core central missions that this organization has. And just from a purely selfish perspective, if you want to increase the value of the organization, the CSPs you work with, you endorse this because you actually have a personal payoff by doing that. And so the value is tremendous.
Thank you, Herbert. Now, we're almost out of time, but I'm going to ask the group just to give us one final closing thought. And I think as we enter into a conference that's very much focused on collaboration and working together, this is a great opportunity for people to step back from the day job and look at some of the challenges ahead. So if there's one area you could advise the audience on, say, look, start here. Where do you start in changing the game with 5G? Where would you choose? Aslan, let's start with you. Tough question.
It's quite. Yeah, I think we've gone through these debates, and I think from the Celcom perspective of Celcom, I think we're looking at the telecom economy in Malaysia, I think you see a decline or even a plateau in terms of growth, mobile growth, yeah. And I think the place that we're actually looking for extra growth, I think across the operators as well, is enterprise, which means it's B2B, and hence that's why basically I think that the whole hype, or is probably the whole enthusiasm, is basically looking at use case for companies, yeah. If I wanted to actually look at it, I would actually look at it use cases within the B2B area, because then it will actually be captive. You will actually be insured to a certain extent what your ROIC will be, what your returns will actually be at the end of the day. Yeah.
So we get started, we experiment with the B2B use cases, we understand that better.
Yeah.
Okay. Shankar, let me come to you. Where would you start, or where have you started?
So for us, the guidepost has truly been the 8 currencies, right? So because that defines, so when we go around that clockwise, right, we had speed and throughput, clearly, that's a big play, consumers and B2C and B2B. But the additional 6 currencies that we talked about, most of them were designed with businesses and society in mind. So we use that as a guidepost to define where we want to play. So if you are a service provider and you are catering to only the B2C segment, you may not necessarily have to build a network that caters to all these 8 currencies. If you are a service provider that says, yes, I want to play in B2C and B2B, but not really in services that are super sensitive to latency, you may not necessarily build to all 8 currencies. You may build to only a few of them, above and beyond the 2, the speed and throughput. That's the optionality that you really have with those 8 currencies, and that's truly been our driving force behind where we want to play, and we have made the commitment. We want to play across the entire spectrum, and we are building a network across all 8 currencies. Doesn't necessarily mean that will work for every service provider there, but that's one place to start.
Okay, very good. Herbert, where should people start?
I think just generally start taking a bit more risks, accept that we can fail, stop having the CFO mentality that unless we have a 72-page Excel business template, that if you, by the way, give it to somebody in a corporation, they will fill it out, no matter what comes back. We have to learn to start taking some risks. We have to learn to not suffocate, talk about the game about young talent, to bring them in, working with startups, and actually challenge a few of the things the way we do it, and take a few risks, or maybe their payment system might be better than the one we have been using in our 500 stores. Let's try it out in a store. And so my belief is that if we embrace what you call agile, just more risk-taking, because the world that was painted today, it's mind-blowing, the opportunities ahead of us. That's the key takeaway. I'm really excited about the next decade, but we can't figure it all out at once. So we have to take some risk, and we have to learn to fail fast, and that's okay. That would be my big things.
Thank you. And Ashley, I'm going to give you the last word. You're the customer of the future, the company that's transforming. What do you want to see from the telecoms industry in the future, and what would be your words of advice to this audience as a company that's already on that journey?
I think the first part I want to write on Herbert's point as well. I think moving away from the typical ROI and IRR discussion, and whenever you look at investing in the technology, that should be put aside. But I think from a wish list perspective, I think selfishly for AirAsia, we are predominantly an ASEAN airline. So that's a market of 650 million population. However, if you look at from a reach perspective in what we aspire to do in a super app and super platform game, when you look at the 25 hubs we have across ASEAN, it's not really a seamless connectivity per se. So I think just trying to find the right word, but I think the ability for the players to not discriminate sites, but in terms of the potential that can be uplifted, not just from a commercial perspective, but also from the well-being. So I think that's sort of a wish list from AirAsia.
Okay, that's a good note to end on. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to our panel this morning. Now, we've heard the vision. We've all got excited by the inspiration. We've heard a little bit of the reality to making that real. To close this session and to give us a few thoughts for the week ahead, I'm delighted to introduce our chairman, Dr. Stefan Rowan, to give us a few closing thoughts and to formally open the conference.
very good morning and a warm welcome from my end, and thanks to the panelists. Great energy, what a start in that conference. Let me give you 3 thoughts which I picked up from this morning to just guide into this conference. Number 1, technology for a purpose. I was deeply touched when Gerard talked about humanity as the purpose for technology. I was also touched when we talked about consumers. That is not about technology, but what do consumers get from that? So let's keep this thought. We're not doing it for technology. We're doing it for a bigger purpose. Secondly, we talk about a platform game. 5G is another opportunity for this industry to build a platform beyond your own operator, beyond your existing ecosystem. I think that's a huge opportunity, but it's also hard work and overcome resistance and doing things quite differently. This brings me to my 3rd point, which is collaboration. Collaboration to build new capabilities. And oh boy, that's where the TM Forum is good for. That's what the TM Forum was founded 30 years back. That's where the TM Forum is reinventing itself with our whole board to do exactly this. So now this is the platform for you. Look at the tracks, look at the fantastic catalysts. I think, again, they are much, much more deeper and more energizing than the ones before. Take your time. And by this, I do declare Digital Transformation Asia open. Thanks a lot.